Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio Podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada.
All right, so we're going to just dive right into it. We normally don't do an introduction. So, Joel Totoro is a friend, someone that I met as I began working with Thorne Research. He's the director of sports science for Thorne, worked for the New England Patriots for 8 years, which I know Derek's going to want to dive in on. Derek being a football guy and working with the NFL, he's going to probably have a ton of questions. But what's been fun is that Joel's been able to jump on our Zoom calls with my challengers, and I think just give an education on supplementation. I mean, I think it's a market out there that it's just Joel, to me it seems like the Wild West. I mean, you can go into stores where things aren't regulated and there's so many different brands, and people are like, well, wait a second, there's one creatine by a GNC brand that's twice as cheap than by this other brand, and why? And is it that the product's not working? Is it just the purity's less? Is it all the above? So it's great having you on. It's gonna be good to kind of bounce around and ask some questions. And I think the general pop's just gonna, get a little bit more comfortable and familiar with the supplement market and the NFL. Right, Derek?
Oh yeah. Lots of questions.
Derek, you want to lead off?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Throw you
under the bus.
Yeah, like the interesting thing for me is like I'll talk to most of the time I'm dealing with the strength and conditioning staff. So you will find, and as you know, there will be different levels of hands-onness based on with nutrition. So sometimes it'll be the strength or performance staff that are just, we'll order the supplements and they'll go with whatever they like. And then sometimes there will be dedicated nutrition professionals. It varies from team to team, it seems, at least in my experience. What are your thoughts on that? Should every team have a dedicated professional to handle the nutrition and supplementation side? I know there's a bunch of strength coaches out there who do this sort of double duty, like, hey, I'm a nutrition professional and I'm a great strength coach as well. But do you think there should be some specificity around like who handles the nutrition side, whether it's meal planning for the players when they travel and the supplementation? Just interested in your thoughts, Joel.
Yeah, no, I really do. It's just such a big part of kind of the whole performance and recovery spectrum that it needs a dedicated professional, right? I think I always say, as a dietitian, I need to be conversational in, physical therapy, athletic training, strength and conditioning, sports psych, so that we can talk to each other and kind of have this conversation. But you kind of need a dedicated person looking through their lens to really hone in on nutrition, because it is such an individual recommendation, right? So we always say there is no, we say we're in the one size fit one profession, because there are so many factors that go in, especially at the elite level, that, it's my job. I work in the supplement industry and it's a full-time job just staying on top of the science there. So yeah, you really do need a dedicated professional.
I have a quick question on, and this is kind of going back before Derek. So why one company over the other? I think the biggest question that the general pop has is, as they're coming in, as they stop into a supplement store or they order online, there's a lot of confusion on, what should they be looking for, and why is it when you find a company, you should really kind of hold on to that company, especially if the purity is at a specific level.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it is a largely unregulated field when you compare it to, say like the pharmaceutical industry. There is no such thing as a pharmaceutical grade supplement, right? There's just not that level of oversight. And because of that, there are great companies like Thorne who do it well. And then there's companies who, don't have no intent to do any ill will, just maybe they don't spend the extra to get the quality or to, research their partners. And then you've got companies that are just actually dubious, right? And they're watering down their product, and, what's on the label is not necessarily what's in the bottle. So you've got, people all over the map, but, probably about 15 years or so ago, people in the industry started realizing like we can make a ton of money by being kind of unscrupulous in the industry. And that's when it kind of blew up and got a little bit crazy, when we went from being questioning more like, will this work? Will this be absorbed, to full on, is this potentially going to cost me some eligibility, right? So It's been crazy. And, you know, knowing more now, being on the supplement side of things, just knowing how much, you know, cost and effort and quality control it takes to get a clean product. I mean, the amount of products we turn away or ingredients we turn away from our quality control, it's astronomical. And you know, when we turn those back, you know, and obviously it's great that we do that. Not every company does, but they're not just going to throw that batch out. They're just going to sell it to somebody else that won't, you know, won't test it. So it is really hard to get to a final clean product that does what it says it does. So
Do you guys
yeah.
test? Do you guys test every batch? Is that something that's even possible to do? Like when you guys make a protein powder or you make your creatine monohydrate, I would imagine that just gets put into the bottle or the canister and on the shelf and off to the store it goes.
No, we do an incredible amount of testing. You know, it's a large part of our operating budget is for testing. You know, and we have a quarantine area. So when the product comes in, you know, it's set in this area, quarantine until it's tested, won't go anywhere. You know, all the way down to, you know, some of our products have cotton on top of it, so we test that for pesticides. Right, those are
Oh wow.
the detail we go through, and then yes, testing on the outside. I mean, we have a lab right there in our facility before it goes to you, the consumer. And then for some of our products that are more applicable to the sports world, we do an outside certification, which is called Nsf Certification for Sport, which tests against all the banned substances at the Olympic and pro level, as well as contaminants, pesticides, heavy metals, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, I have no clue. Like, if I don't have people like yourself and Don to lean on and say, like, "Hey, what do you think about this product?" I'm kind of going with like, I guess you get what you pay for. So I might have to spend more money, but then who knows? Like, I have this vision in my head that everybody's pulling from the same factory in China, right, to make their products and then slapping nice labels on it. And then, hey, let's sign that athlete to be our spokesperson. And the marketing seems to be more important than the product. And I'm just saying, as a layperson, like, how do you know?
Yeah, so you're kind of spot on there. Rarely is it, you know, I would say Thorne's a research and wellness company that has a supplement, whereas a lot of other companies are a marketing brand that has a product, which happens to be supplements. You know, we have a number of PhDs, medical doctors, naturopathic naturopathic doctors, registered dietitians, all in house, full time, dedicated to this science side. You know, and we have up to, you know, 20 research projects going on at any time, from, you know, conception to completion. And we partner with the Mayo Clinic. You know, we are the only supplement company they'll do research with. So you know, Thorne does it differently. There's a couple companies out there that do it differently and take it seriously, and, you know, see themselves as kind of a player in the healthcare space, and the kind of the responsibility to play in that space, right? But you're right. Very few people realize it is kind of a warehousing for a lot of companies, and you know, there are a lot of companies that just white label, right? So they just make vitamin C, right? And it's the same you're getting, whether it's, you know, this fancy label or that fancy label. It's the same. Very few people manufacture their products the way that Thorne does. So yeah, you are a lot of times just getting, you know, the same kind of batch that's going around. But the question is then, what additives have they put in it? You know, how much are you actually getting? I've got a colleague, and she always says, it's not you are what you eat, it's what you eat and can absorb. So a lot of these companies will put binders and fillers in their product that, you know, may interfere with absorption. So like you said, you know, are you getting your bang for your buck? You know, so a whey protein powder that you're going to use 90% of, you know, may be more expensive, but to get that same amount of actually absorbable protein, you probably have to use two of the cheaper one, right? So you kind of have to, it is tough to kind of just walk in the store and be like, what do I take and why? So yeah. And that's one of the things we're trying to do at Thorne, is put out as much education as we can. You know, if you have the science and if you have the information, then you can make that one size fits one choice for yourself.
No, it's fascinating because the first thing that you went into was absorption, right? Like, well, maybe one product you have to have twice the amount to absorb, but like even beyond that, I've heard of some nightmare stories of, specific ingredients put into these supplements. I mean, as bad as, I think over a decade ago, there was a company that pulled their product off the shelf because it was a pre-workout, because they actually found traces of crystal meth in it. Right. So I've heard some terrible stuff. But how often, I mean, giving examples, how often, like what percentage of the products on the shelf would you have to take a stab or guess at and say, you know what? No, it's 50% of the companies, 80% of the companies. Like, do you guys have an idea on what we're actually battling with? Because the way that I look at it, if someone's going to go out and buy a cheaper product and not get anything out of it, like what the hell? You're just throwing money out the door. There's some people, well, this company's expensive, but it's actually working, or it's actually going to do what the product says it's going to do. So you're better off just not taking anything or going and spending more money on a supplement. But in your experience, how often do you guys find that products aren't what they say they are?
Yeah, I would say at best, maybe 20% of the companies do it to the level we do, and I'm being
Wow.
optimistic there, right? So to get not only, there's a difference. You were talking about that pre-workout. That's, like I said, that's intentional, misinformation and intentional doping. I think very few of those stick around. It's just not, you don't last long enough. People catch on, right? But you make money quick, and then they shut it down, put a new name on it, new label on it, do it again for 3 years, so they're shut down. So I think there's probably relatively few of those. I think there's just a ton in the middle that, use the binders, use the fillers, use poorly absorbed versions of the ingredients. So I'd say probably 10 to 20% have that you're going to get the product, what's in it, only what's in it, and it's going to work right for you. So that's pretty small lot out there. And like I said, again, it's not necessarily profitable to make to make a clean product. Not that it's not profitable, but there's so much extra work that you have to care about to put into your product to get to that final product where, Thorne, we could stop 7%, 7 steps before we finish. And large percentage of the population wouldn't notice, right? But we do, and we know, right? So we do go that extra mile, and like I said, there's a handful of companies that are kind of doing it well. You mentioned the Wild West. I feel like we're kind of, the Wyatt Earps. There's very few of us, but there are some good companies out there that take it seriously.
I had a question, Joel, like, and it was kind of off of Dawn's reference there, because we had my daughter's asking questions. She's 14 years old and she's on TikTok, and she says, "Oh, these people were taking these supplements, and should I take pre-workout?" And we had a question go out to Dawn, and he had a great answer. But for young people, what guidelines do you have for them in terms of like supplementation? Should they just avoid it? Should they just be focusing on diet? Is there anything that could be of use, or should they just stay away for a while?
Yeah, so I look at supplements kind of a couple different ways. Like in my mind, what I would consider like a clinical supplement, like are you actually treating a deficiency or whatnot? Like things like vitamin D, it's just not prevalent in the diet, right? And if you're living, northern part of the country in the winter, you're not going to get enough, right? So things like that can make sense. Things like a probiotic that are just kind of human needs. There's those supplements, right? And I think those are safe. With guidance, obviously you always talk to your healthcare practitioner, but with guidance, there's is this kind of a food replacement, or am I missing this in the diet due to an allergy? Those are kind of one form of supplements. And then there's kind of the performance enhancement and like, am I trying to maximize my potential? For still growing kids, I generally focus on calories first, just because it takes so much to grow. Like, I think we miss that a lot. We calculate, okay, we did this much exercise, we need this much fluid, but forget to do the calories of, I'm physically creating new tissue just growing, right? Just going through puberty. And I think a lot of times we miss that total calorie need. And it's something we see. It's called relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's a kind of a combination of negative outcomes that happen if you're constantly under fueling. And a lot of times it's not intentional. There is a plan. I was a distance runner in high school, and I was just an idiot, right? And by the end of it, I was like borderline anemic from just because I was doing too much and not taking enough in, right? And I would have never known until it popped on a physical, right? So it's very easy to underconsume at that youth level. So I was focused on, are you hitting your calorie needs just to grow and do the physical activity you're doing? Once we get there, and like I said, kind of as you've done growing, if you kind of have what I would say an adult body, then we can start looking at some performance enhancement and some of the other products. But rarely, if you're not fueling the I would say you have to take care of the human performance. And if you're not fueling the human needs, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get that top 2% that you're looking for, that extra edge, if you're not taking care of your foundational needs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I find it helpful, but that's also because I feel like my nutrition's dialed in and my training's dialed in. So when I'm on a good supplement regimen and I'm actually my home's in construction, so I could see in my office right now, literally all the Thorne products that I have up there. But there's certain things I feel like are the um, kind of the staples of my yearly regimen. And one is, yes, getting in a whey protein. And I don't really look at, it's funny, I don't really look at whey protein as, um, yes, I'm supplementing a meal, but it's not as, it's more like, for me, it's more like a meal replacement or a way for me to kind of get something in that my body really needs because of my training. But getting into a lot of the things that the questions that people have about what are the standard supplements you should be taking. I know, I'm getting my magnesium in, I'm getting my vitamin D in, I'm getting my multi in. And, most of the year, I'll probably consume a fish oil as well. Those are the four things that I feel like don't really change that much. Is there anything else? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? What would you tell the general pop who's coming aboard and they want to, say, listen, I want to give myself a little bit of a boost. I'm sure my nutrition plan isn't giving me all the vitamins and minerals that I need. What should, John Smith be taking or Jane Doe be taking if they're going to start off?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect kind of, those are the ones that off the top of my head I always go to too, as kind of rarely does anyone's diet meet those needs. And we actually did a study that will be coming out publicly with athletes, coming from Power 5 schools where they had a dietitian, if not three. They had strength coaches, they had unlimited meals, and we did find those things are pretty common. And a lot of other researchers kind of supported this. It is the omega-3 index, so your fish oils. It is magnesium, which is something people don't really realize, but to me, it's especially in athletes, like almost as prevalent as vitamin D deficiency, right? And then the vitamin D deficiency. So those are kind of like three big ones there. I do think protein's important, specifically around workouts. It is kind of the message that tells the body to stop recovering. So you're going to be in this negative deficit until your body's like, oh, okay, we're done doing that. Okay, let's switch over to recovery. And like you said, I consider whey protein similar to, when I was talking about like a food type supplement. I mean, it's dried milk, right? Essentially. So, and your body doesn't really care if the protein's from an egg or from a scoop of protein, right? But it's that convenience factor. And, you do have to take into fact, is your gut ready to take in food post-workout, right? So we know the timing of getting protein in our system to our muscles to start recovering is important. So we have to do that, but a lot of people aren't going to sit down and eat a chicken breast right after they work out, right? So it's understanding, when a supplement is the most convenient or the right choice for you at that time. So I think those are standards. I think as a whole, just Americans, but specifically athletes that maybe not at the elite level that are testing it daily is hydration level, right? It really does impact so much, and there's stats upon stats and research upon research of how just 2% of your body weight dehydration impacts, starting time and free throw percentage and really everything in sport. So it really does matter. So that's one I think people like, one of those where it's a simple tweak, but people always come back to me and they're like, wow, I feel amazing. And I'm like, well, that should be your normal, right? This should be baseline. This shouldn't be extra, right? So I think there's those, I think, for people like, and then from there, you kind of look at you specifically. I always kind of go like head to toe, like, okay, how's my focus? How's my cognition? And brain fog, how do I physically feel my joints, and kind of just go through the body. How's my gut feel? Am I doing okay there? And from there, I'll kind of jump off and add pieces, like I said, to get to that individual prescription. But I think those are the really good foundations. Like I said, you have to treat the human first before the body will even consider being elite. So I think those are great. I'm a big fan of creatine, just baseline for most people if you're using your muscles, and especially the kind of active aging population where you want to maintain muscle integrity. So I think we're seeing research there that really supports it. We're looking at how creatine impacts the brain in general, but also post-concussive. So there's just a lot there where I think a lot of people, it's a good kind of, I call it the multivitamin for the muscle, and then, if you've got some deficiencies from allergies or just foods you avoid, a good multi is always kind of a good little insurance policy. So those are kind of the, if I don't know anything about you, those are ones I think will probably make an impact. And then, as I, every fact I know about you will then kind of tailor that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned hydration, Joel, and I'm thinking specifically about muscle cramps. particularly as it happens in a game. How would you normally address that? Because I know it's not necessarily just throwing more fluid into somebody. It can be very complicated. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different steps you go through. Like, there is the first one is always, do we have enough muscle, enough fluid in the muscle? I have a colleague that always explains like your muscle can be, a raw sirloin, perfectly malleable, or it can be that same piece of meat as jerky, right? Which one do you want to go out on the field with? Which one's going to tear faster? So there is that aspect of it. And then we look to electrolytes. So, you think about your sweat, it's salty, that's coming out of you. Are we putting enough back in, right? Or did we have enough to begin with? So I think those are kind of the baseline if you're not paying attention to hydration. But a lot of the athletes I work with that, we can't figure it out. I know how much is, we measure their sweat rate. We know how much fluid's going in them. Okay, that's not the answer. And that's kind of actually how I found Thorne. We were starting to look at magnesium, so in the muscle, you need calcium and magnesium to kind of contract and relax. And most people just stop at the salts and don't realize what else is in your sweat and what else is involved in, muscle physiology, right? So that's where I started realizing. And when you test normal magnesium, serum magnesium, it's not really representative of what's in the body, just like calcium comes in and out of the bone. So you have to do like an extra test. So once we started looking at those, so it's red blood cell magnesium, we started realizing that like some of these athletes are like clinically low. Like if I saw this back in my hospital days, it'd be something that would be replete right there. So I think a lot of times people miss the calcium magnesium factor. And then the kind of last one with none of that works is, that can be neurological, and that takes a little bit longer to figure out, right? But there's a difference between like a slow to relax muscle and actual cramping muscle or a fatigue muscle. I tell this story often, but one of my biggest, not failures, but it took me way too long to figure this out. I had an athlete, football player that cramped only on game days, right? Couldn't figure it out. And or felt like he was about to cramp on game day, and I knew it. Like we did everything. We sent him to a hydration lab, and then I look. He was wearing shoes he only wears on game day, so a different brand, and he was taped up in a way he normally wasn't. And he's a nervous guy, so he's bouncing up and down on his calves pregame, right? And it took me weeks. I just happened to look over there, so he's just using muscles in a way he normally hadn't before. So he was more like fatiguing the kind of supportive muscles, and that's when he was like, okay, I'm feeling something. This is what feels like when I'm about to cramp. So, it took us weeks of trying to figure out all these different remedies. And in reality, it was a physical issue, right? So sometimes it's not even a cramp, right? So it is, and that's, to your previous question, to kind of kick it off, why you need, at the highest level, why you need someone really looking at all these different factors, right? So, if we have an athlete and something's happening to them, I got to look through my lens. Are there any nutrient deficiencies we're missing? Is the energy there? Strength and conditioning, is he strong enough? Is there stamina there? Athletic training, is he physically able to do it? Is there any nagging injuries? And then sports psychology, is there anything going on? So what's happening to the athlete is true. And when you have all these different lenses, that's when you get to the perfect answer faster. But, when you don't have someone who's, was able to just step aside and watch this athlete the whole way through his pregame workout to figure out what was different, that's when we were able to get the answer. But he could have gone a career before anyone noticed that he was wearing different shoes differently.
It's so interesting how you could spend your entire year, your entire career preparing for a moment, through training, through skill acquisition. And then if you're dehydrated, if you're not fueled properly that given day, you literally can throw it all out the window. And to me, so when Derek asked that question, we all know the answer. We all knew the answer is like, yes. And we were trying to answer this right now for the public who's listening. I almost find that organizations are putting too little value into this. It's almost like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, maybe we'll bring a nutritionist in. I'm like, are you crazy? Like don't bring someone in who is relatable, bring someone in who's going to gel with the community and be able to have that conversation and that your team's going to trust. Just don't get some schmuck off the street with a weekend certification. Get someone who's really going to be relatable, so your athletes are going to be able to absorb and take that information and run. Because I know for a fact, as well as you and Derek, that if you're not prepared that day, or you're not preparing a couple of days before from a hydration and nutritional standpoint, it's that much more difficult to be successful.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you're right. And it's crazy to me, when I started 2004, I was the only full-time sports dietitian in all of the major sports, and there was a handful in college. And in that 15 years now, I mean, there's not a Power 5 team without college without at least one, most on multiple. Almost all the pro teams have at least a consulting dietitian, if not a full-time. So in 15 years, and what it was is, people like, Tom Osborne, Bill O'Brien's, the Bill Belichick's, all these visionaries, so this is an area I'm not taking advantage of. This is an advantage I can have over teams if we're stronger in the fourth because we're fueled better. My coaching is going to be on point, but what else can I do to really get an advantage over somebody? And that's when the kind of recovery wars started.
Is there anything out there that you look to provide during, say, a rehabilitation process? So I know, there was a guy, California was talking about, giving people like Knox gelatin for tendon health and all that. Are there any other things that we can do during, say, a muscle injury or a post-surgery that you would look to add to their regimen?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that, and I think it's kind of often overlooked when people just see sports. They see game day, they see walking down with the Gatorade and the towel and whatever, but it really is like I said, my original, when I came out of college, I was working in ICU and trauma, right? And so I brought that over to brought it over to the NFL, so I just went into the physical therapist and athletic trainer. And, so every time we had someone with a surgery, I was like, okay, well, this is what I would have done. I have a rehab program for an inpatient. Why don't I have one here? So we started building those out and, kind of making sure that I know what the demands of, the return to play and the rehab are, but first we have to recover, right? So there's a couple different phases. Like there's supplements you can have to physically speak to the integrity of the wound or to the, repaired ligament and what it is. So that's where you look at things like collagen, you look at vitamin C, you look at zinc, right? To physically build that scaffolding, right? And then we have to look at, managing inflammation, after that initial post-surgical period. So there is, kind of damage both from the surgery and from the injury, but also during rehab, right? That's what rehab is progressively loading the limb to get back to normal. So there's that. So we have to think about that. Okay, that phase is kind of happening. And then there's the return to play. We're literally recreating new muscle, right? And so there's the muscle integrity, things like the creatine, amino acids, protein, beta alanine for stamina. So those are all things we look at. There's a couple different phases of where you are from physically under the knife to getting back to that, 75%, 80%, 90%, and then back to where you were pre-surgery or pre-injury. So yeah, I think there's that. And then I think, on the flip side, that's full on surgery, but then there's managing the day-to-day, the bruising and so we look at things like bromelain, which is a pineapple extract, which helps with bruising, right? And then we do look at that managing the inflammation. So whether it's curcumin, whether it's, fish oil, all those different things that just kind of help the body respond to the normal inflammatory response to exercise, right? It just happens even when you and I are training casually and we don't feel pain. There's still inflammation that's happening and your body has to account for that.
Sorry, guys.
Yep.
I was on mute. Backing up for 1 second, a very common question asked is about whey protein powder versus food, right? And, in the past, it was always, get real meals in. We understand the importance of that with the micronutrient ratios and the bioavailability of products. But this whey protein nowadays, it's getting pretty damn good, right? I mean, what would you say from a bioavailability standpoint? Obviously, it depends on the individual. If an individual is having 6 ounces of chicken, how much they're going to absorb really comes down to their things like digestion, their gut health, et cetera. Do you find through a lot of your tests and research that what you guys have found with Thorne, it's pretty close in reference to the quality of protein that you're getting in, or do you still believe that, it is a shade below real animal protein?
Yeah. So as far as actual usable protein and biological value, a true whey protein isolate is up. It's pretty high. So there's actual research has been done, and they kind of set the like the most usable protein as an egg, right? And that's one. So it kind of goes off that. So whey protein is always up there. Sometimes better than an actual whole food, right? Because there are other things you have to get through in a food. So from a pure usable protein standpoint, yeah, it's just a great source. And to me, it's a convenience thing, right? It's your body doesn't really care the difference between that chicken and egg. It's total amount, right? As long as it's a whole complete protein, you're getting the amino acids you need, the parts of the protein you need. But then you do have to consider, like, yes, when I'm eating an egg, there are other nutrients in there that may not be in the whey protein. So as long as you understand that, but it's just like, you would never use a glass of milk as your only source of protein either, right? So it's just knowing that where it fits into your pattern. And again, as I mentioned, you have to put the factors of convenience. Can I get an actual other source of protein in me fast enough? And then can I tolerate it GI wise? And what else is going on? So like the active actually endurance training, literally kind of pulls the cells of your gut apart. So it's actually it's in less of a good place to absorb the nutrients, right? So at that point, will a whole food get absorbed as easily as something that's kind of already a couple of steps down the, just a little bit of digestion needed. So, that's where we would look at kind of whey protein as the option.
Well,
What about sorry, Derek.
Yeah, no, you're probably asking the same question, but I'm like, do you have vegan or vegetarian athletes that you have to now sort of provide supplementation for and navigate that?
Yeah, so there's been, gosh, I think we all remember the original vegan and vegetarian proteins that were less than palatable, right? So that we've come a long way, and we learned a lot science-wise and in blending different things together. So whether it's rice and pea together, kind of come close to looking at, what a whey protein profile would be, or like an egg or a complete protein. So there are some amino acids that aren't as prevalent in the vegan sources, but we've been smart enough to either make a combination of different proteins, where this one's strong in theanine, where this one's weak, right? So we can mix a blend that kind of approaches it, and most of them come close. But it is, yeah, you have to look into certain, like, kind of dig deep and learn about the amino acids, and it may just be you need 25 grams of vegan protein to match 20 grams of whey, right, just to get the total.
Oh, so it's not that big of a discrepancy anymore. You can't really have that argument anymore, saying that vegan protein has less of an amino acid profile than, say, whey protein, or you're not going to be able to build muscle on vegan protein. You're just saying that the absorption with vegan protein is a little bit less. Like, you might have to have a little bit more of it to equate to what you might be getting out of a high quality whey isolate.
Yeah. So for example, the one I always look at, so leucine is the amino acid. So the part of the protein that triggers that your body from going from breaking down muscle to starting the recovery. So we want between 2.3 to 3 grams of that. So a lot of vegan proteins, to get the leucine, if we're just isolating that, you would probably need about 25 grams as opposed to 20 grams of whey protein. So it's really just knowing where you are. And again, if vegan protein is going to be a regular source, if it's low in a certain amino acid, but that's really high in a food, cool, just eat more of that food, right? So it's not, your body's not isolating, did I get all my needs from this protein? It's still handling up throughout the day. So you can know that. But yes, I think most of the companies, the better companies out there, they're designing it with this blend of proteins that complement each other, so that you do get close to a whole protein source, or a full complement of amino acids.
Now, you've worked, if I remember correctly, you've worked in both, say, college environments and pro environments. What are the main differences there that you found in terms of, like, managing, say, student athletes versus the, I was going to say the particularities, but the peculiarities of a pro athlete and their different preferences and how they think?
Yeah, and I kind of did it backwards from the way most people journey. So I started in pros and then trickled down to college, just to get kind of that experience. And for me, the kind of biggest shock in the beginning, or for me, the growth I had to do is, when I started in the NFL, I was the same age as most of the guys, right? And it was more of a peer, and we were just, I was part of the team, I was part of the support team, and it was just made sense that I was there. Whereas when I went to the collegiate level, yeah, the bodies are physically pretty similar, but they're 17, they're 18, right? So I'm more of a coach, I'm a mentor. These guys are, 5-star recruits, but they miss their mom, so that was kind of like an adjustment. Like, I had to be a different person, and I had to connect differently. Some of the things at the pro level that have just been, kind of reinforced, they're just part of the routine. I didn't think about some of those softer skills. It was just kind of like, at the pro level, I was like, oh, here, we're all here, do your job. The goal is a Super Bowl every year, right? Whereas college, like, I legitimately I felt a lot more like a coach and a mentor than whatnot. And the base skills just kind of aren't there, I remember one story I tell often about kind of really making sure you know, if you're counseling somebody or you're coaching somebody, you do have to know everything about them, right? Or really treat them as a person. But, I had these offensive linemen at Michigan. They were awesome. They scheduled their classes as close as possible. So they had this train together. One of the parents had a Costco card so that, they were living off campus. They, I helped them, write meals and plan everything. And we went to Costco, kind of taught them how to shop, navigate that, because many of them had not, done shopping for themselves, which another thing you never thought about. And it happened to be snowing. So being a nice guy, I was running the groceries in with them, and I looked around and I was like, do you guys have any pots or pans? So I had this great plan, and then they had no skill to cook, so we had to like dive into that. But I could have just, if I had just backed out of the driveway, they would have, failed. And that's a coaching tip where I have to learn, like, not only am I giving the knowledge, but do I give you the so what and the tools to really get to make that habit and part of your lifestyle.
There's been a little argument about branched chain amino acids, and if you're getting enough protein in throughout the day, that it's causing you just to have expensive urine. What's your take on that? Do you feel like for an athlete who's trying to put muscle on, regardless of whether they're receiving enough protein or not, it's still a supplement that they should be taking?
Situationally, right? So I consider it like, it is just a form of protein. Like, it's one step down the line, but it's just like we have whole milk and then we pull the whey out, right? And then we, make whey isolate and pull the extra stuff out, right? And then we just go one step past that, right? So amino acids, so they're a low calorie version, but it is, at the end of the day, when it hits your bloodstream, there's less digestion involved, but it's still the same mix of amino acids, right? So there's a time and a place. Now, if you had a full meal and are meeting your protein needs, then yeah, it's just an expensive source of protein, right? But we've used it in weight management sports, when there's specific weights they have to hit, so to make sure we are hitting the physiological needs for amino acids without a calorie, right? Or when you're in trauma recovery, when the needs are just so high, we can pump a little bit more amino acids in there, right? And there are I do like to, when possible, provide the entire amino acid mix as opposed to just the branch chain. So that's just structurally, there's three that kind of are branch chains in their structure. The reason they get the attention is because I mentioned leucine earlier, right? The one that triggers recovery for the muscle. That is a branch chain amino acid. So yes, that needs to happen, but your body has a need for the rest of the amino acids as well, right? So you can't just take one, just like you can't take vitamin C and think you're good on vitamins, right? You need the B's, you need A, you need D, right? So so branch chain amino acids and amino acids in general, there's a time and a place, and I've used them when I'm traveling and just the food sources were poor, right? And I was like, all right, well, I need some protein, amino acids, right? So now, yes, if that's the plan to get my protein needs every day, yeah, it's going to be pretty expensive. But to say expensive urine, that kind of predicts that you're not absorbing it. So your body absorbs and uses amino acids. It's just a matter of are they the right choice at that time?
It's the one supplement that I feel like I gauge according to my day, right? So there might be a day if my meals are a little tighter and they're spaced out a little bit closer to my training times, I don't necessarily need it. But if there's a little bit more of a gap, if I'm eating maybe 2.5 hours before I train, that might be something I begin sipping like right before a workout and drink throughout the workout. And it helps substantially. It isn't something where I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is working or not, even from being satiated and from an actual fuel standpoint, never actually getting hungry during the workouts or crashing. I mean, these are all things that actually I feel helps out, but it's one of those supplements where I feel like I may not need every day, even though I probably take it 90% of the time.
Yeah, I call it a cheat code for protein, right? So it is just, it's in your blood really quick, right? And so that is the thing, like you mentioned some of the things you're feeling. I always talk about, and this isn't my original thought, but somebody once referred to the body as a survival machine, right? And when we think about like all your body cares about is like literally not dying, right? So when you're training, it doesn't know the difference between that stress. Part of your body doesn't know the difference between that stress. Are you bench pressing? Or are you stuck under a boulder, right? Are you running sprints? Or are you running away from a buffalo, right? So your body gets in this little panic mode. So things like having the amino acids in the bloodstream, because they do get there quickly, because there's not as much digestion needed, it is kind of like, okay, we're cool, right? Having that in the bloodstream means like lets your body know like, okay, we have a plan for this. we're going to be okay. Recovery is ready to happen as soon as we're ready to do it. So it does have an impact of having the nutrients in the bloodstream and available. Does trigger all these different pathways in the body that kind of go more towards, okay, stop panicking about just trying to survive this exercise bout, and let's make sure we're looking at all the other things we need to do, heart rate and breathing and all those things we do without thinking about. So there is the speed at which amino acids can get in the blood. That's something you can take advantage of, and the portability. And again, it's you mix it in thin liquid, and there's rarely a GI issue with it, right? So those are all the times you would use it. But again, when it gets to the bloodstream, your body doesn't know the difference between the leucine from an amino acid supplement or an egg.
I have a selfish question, Joel. I am turning 52 this year, and I don't know if you specialize in geriatric supplementation and nutrition, but one of the things, and Dawn isn't getting any younger either, let's be honest.
No.
One, one of the things that I had a question about was, was what should somebody like myself, as I'm getting older and I find, one, if I look at a donut, I get fatter, my energy's not as good, my sleep's not, if I have alcohol or caffeine, it disrupts my sleep. What are some key things that I should be focusing on as I enter my golden years in terms of nutrition and supplementation?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there. Like, you're right, there are just certain things that happen with age, right? So one of the things we look at a lot is nicotinamide riboside, which it's that and NAD are related in the kind of metabolic pathway they live in. Those are getting a lot of attention. So that, and one of the things they do is they kind of support your mitochondrial health, which is something that's your mitochondria kind of act independently as their own little organism within our cells, but they just naturally degrade over time, right? So supporting that has some major downstream effects as far as energy and just aging, and more research comes out about that all the time. I think one of the biggest things I focus on is, like you said, metabolism drops and whatnot, is supporting the ability to be active. And now there actually has to be, obviously, on the other side, the intention to be active and do everything you do, but the quality of life and the longevity of people who are, and I'm not saying you have to run a marathon every year, but just, even if it's just, walking or whatnot, just some kind of movement, just kind of a little bit of injury prevention, and just a lot of, we could spend an hour about the benefits of exercise, from brain on down, but we do see, some of the factors to longevity or increases to mortality happen from injuries. Hip is one of the most devastating injuries for people, and it just, you think about, you go from being even moderately active to not being active, and then you're in bed, and all the kind of negative downstream things that happen from inactivity. So that's one of the things I think is most important, is really taking care of how active and kind of your joints and whatnot, what's preventing you from being active, and kind of triaging that backwards. I think those are kind of the biggest things. I mentioned creatine for just muscle health and aging. Those muscles kind of tend to waste as we age, so physical activity will keep them intact, but also giving them the nutrients they need to kind of have the best possible chance to keep you active, right, and recover from that day to day. And then from there, it's just knowing your body, paying attention, doing that triage, doing a checklist of, okay, what feels out of whack, getting frequent blood work yearly to see, okay, what's out of whack there, and kind of, do I have a plan for that? And just kind of, you do have to be a little bit more intentional as you age, you have to work to prevent aging, whereas we're young, it's just going to happen anyway, and we're able to handle a lot of things. But you've got years, 50 years of buildup of kind of just experience that your body's done. We all have scars, we've got all this stuff. So just knowing that's, I guess, not ignoring the fact that it's happened, but kind of getting aggressive and taking charge of, okay, yeah, like, we're gonna eventually age, but what can I do to slow that process? What can I do to make sure that I'm living the best life I can at each age set point in my age?
Can you discuss creatine a bit? Because it is probably one of the most highly researched supplements on the shelf, but it just seems like there's so many question marks right now when it comes down to things like loading and unloading, and should we be on it all year long? Or is it just for men, right? Are women taking it now? What is it actually doing to the body? Can you just maybe give everyone a quick Cliff Notes version onto those questions?
Yeah, so the quick answer is if you have a muscle and you use it, then you can probably benefit from creatine, right? It is one of the nutrients. It's how we provide, how we create energy in the muscle, and there is a hydrating factor to it as well. So going back to the sirloin versus jerky, right? It just, are your muscles hydrated in their best possible situation? So the problem is, so you basically have a tank that you can fill with creatine storage in your muscle, right? It's not necessarily amazingly absorbed from food, or it may not be high enough in the diet to fill that tank. So if you're just walking around with 75% of your power and then you top it off, cool, that's instant 25%, power output, right? But so there is, if you have like an actual performance goal or a competition, we can speed it up how fast we fill that tank by doing the loading dose for a month or 3 weeks to a month. But if you just kind of want to get it, and to me, it's a consistency supplement. It's kind of like fish oil. Like if you miss a dose, you shouldn't notice it, right? It is getting that tank full and then just maintaining that. So how much did I take out? Do I have enough in my diet to replace it? So for most people, 5 grams daily is fine to get to that saturation point and then kind of hold it there. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more muscles you have, or the smaller you are, the less you have. So it does vary, but general population, 3 to 5 grams daily usually gets you to a pretty good place. It's funny to me because it was one of the most earliest supplements to really have some research behind it. There's a lot of misconceptions about it. And it was back in the day when we were looking at all these loading doses and people were like, some is good, more is better, that we had some, people would have some issues with GI issues or cramping. And the reason of that is if you take too much of anything, right, your body's going to want to dilute it, right? If you take too much salt, your body's going to pull some water in, you're going to have some pretty negative GI issues with increased water losses. So, and like you said, it's been studied since the 90s. There's thousands of studies on creatine and safety. So, so it's funny that some of those kind of negative connotations of creatine still hang around, but I kind of equate it to, where eggs were the demon for a while because they forgot to look at, the sausage and the bacon that people were eating with their meals. It was never the egg, right? It was just an innocent bystander. So, yeah, I think very few people have an issue with creatine dosing it at 3 to 5. Some of the emerging research with creatine in the brain, post-concussive, people are looking at, 30, 40 grams a day. By no means do I recommend that, but just knowing that the body can handle significantly more under certain circumstances. So 3 to 5 is pretty manageable for most people.
Awesome. Well, listen, Joel, we can't thank you enough for your time. I mean, I can't believe an hour already went. Derek, time flies, man, when you get into a zone. But I think there's a lot of great content that we're going to give a lot of our viewers. I mean, Joel's been someone who's come on my Zoom calls for my challengers. They're already asking for him to come back on again soon because they learned so much. But if the people listening to this want to find more about Thorne, can you just tell them the website, maybe where they can follow you, et cetera?
Yeah, so thorne.com, pretty easy. There's a huge library of articles and research and video to kind of just not just about supplements, but in general health and wellness to begin with. And then, we're active on Instagram and whatnot. And so you can always find us there. So we're at a pretty exciting time in our company. We've brought in kind of the testing side of our company and bringing in, some of the science of artificial intelligence to really get people to that real specific, what works for me and why. So instead of the guesswork. So it's a really exciting time in the industry as a whole of really pairing science with the quality products. So there's a lot to learn on the website. You can spend hours on there learning, and we do our doctors and myself. We host a weekly podcast, so it's the Thorne podcast. It's on all platforms, and we really deep dive everything from like we have one on mitochondrial health, so you can learn a lot about that. If that or the Nicotinamide Riboside tickles your fancy and you want to learn a little bit more about the active aging, we've got an episode on that. We could spend hours on gut health. So anything you really want to know. Because we do have such a robust medical team, we've kind of covered everything from, legitimate clinical issues all the way through, day-to-day general wellness.
Well, I know Derek, Derek, I spend a lot of time on the Thorne research site, so you should probably go check it out as well. And Dee, when I see you in person, I'll end up bringing you some product for you to try because I know how difficult it is to get it over to Canada. But Yeah, Joel, thanks a lot for our listeners who want to go see. I actually have a Thorn store up at donsaladino.com. You can go check out some of my favorites. And Derek, I'll make sure to put together a little goodie bag for you. Joel, thanks so much for your time, brother. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and let's do this again.
Would love to. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Joel.